When silence speaks louder than war. The universal signal. Before we begin, drop a comment below and let me know you're here. It really helps the algorithm share this story with more sci-fi fans like you. Now, let's dive in. The distress signal cut through every communication channel in the galaxy. Not a request. Not a plea. A command. The Chronicle Empire, the most powerful military force known to civilization, had sent one simple message that froze blood and veins across 1,000 worlds. All species will submit tribute. Resistance means extinction. You have 30 days. In the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from hundreds of species gathered in panic. The chamber, usually filled with endless debates and political maneuvering, had gone silent. Fear hung in the air like smoke. The gathering storm. Ambassador Theron of the Val'Kesh stood at his podium, his 6 arms trembling. His people were traitors, not warriors. The thought of facing the Chronicle made his skin change colors rapidly, showing his terror to everyone present. "We must comply," he said, his voice shaking. The Chronicle have destroyed 12 civilizations in the past century. 12. They don't negotiate. They don't show mercy. They simply erase those who defy them. Across the chamber, High Counselor Mira of the Talcine nodded, her crystalline body dimming with despair. "My people remember the fall of Gareth Prime. 3 billion souls gone in a single day. The Chronicle turned an entire planet into glass. We cannot fight them." Species after species stood to agree. The Chronicle fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. Their weapons could crack planets. Their soldiers were bred for war, each one worth 10 normal fighters. Against such power, what could anyone do but bow? The human question. In the back of the chamber, almost unnoticed, sat Ambassador Elena Vasquez of Earth. She was small compared to most aliens, her dark hair pulled back, her face calm. She had said nothing during the entire debate. Now, as the vote to surrender was about to begin, she stood. "Humanity votes no," she said quietly. The chamber erupted. Voices rose in disbelief and anger. How could the humans, one of the youngest species in the assembly, dare to refuse? Ambassador Theron turned to her, his voice rising. "You've been part of the galactic community for barely 50 years. You know nothing of the Chronicle. This is suicide." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "We know enough. And we don't kneel to bullies, no matter how big they are." High Counselor Mira floated forward, her voice softer but urgent. "Please, Ambassador Vasquez. Be reasonable. Your planet has 3 billion people. The Chronicle will kill them all. Is pride worth that price?" Elena smiled slightly, though there was no humor in it. "It's not about pride. It's about principle. And you're wrong about one thing. We won't be facing them alone." The quiet network. What the assembly didn't know was that Elena had been busy for the past 3 weeks. While other species panicked and prepared to surrender, humanity had been reaching out. Not to the powerful civilizations or the great empires. No, humans had contacted the quiet ones. The species nobody noticed. The ones who lived on the edges of galactic society. The miners, the traders, the colonists on forgotten worlds. The civilizations that had been pushed aside, ignored, or looked down upon. Humanity had sent them a simple message. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Stand with us. In the dark corners of space, on mining asteroids and trading stations, on colony worlds where life was hard and prospects were dim, beings of 100 different species received that message. And something stirred in their hearts. Something they thought they had lost. Hope. The Chronicle response. When the Chronicle heard that one species had refused their demand, they laughed. Actually laughed. In their command ship, War Commander Dracus reviewed the data on humanity. A young species. Limited military. No history of major conflicts. They were insects. Annoying insects that needed to be crushed. We will make an example, Dracus announced to his officers. The human homeworld first. We destroy it slowly, broadcasting to the entire galaxy. Let them watch what happens to those who defy the Kravish Empire. His fleet, 3,000 warships strong, set course for Earth. The journey would take 15 days. Dracus ordered his communications teams to send footage of the fleet's approach to every species in the galaxy. Fear was a weapon, and he would wield it expertly. Humanity prepares. On Earth, in the Global Defense Command Center, Admiral James Park stood before a holographic display of the approaching Kravish fleet. Around him, military leaders from every nation on Earth waited for orders. The room was silent, tense. "Sir," a young officer said hesitantly, "the projections are clear. Even with our full military mobilized, we can't stop that fleet. They'll overwhelm our defenses in hours." Park nodded slowly. "I know. That's why we're not trying to stop them." The room erupted in confused questions. Park raised his hand for silence. "For 3 weeks, we've been preparing. Not weapons. Not shields. Something else entirely. Something the Kravish won't see coming." He turned to face his officers, his expression hard as iron. "We're going to teach the galaxy something important. You don't need to be the strongest to win. You just need to be the smartest. And the bravest." The Hidden Alliance. While the galaxy watched the Kravish fleet approach Earth, something else was happening. Ships were moving. Not military vessels. Cargo ships. Mining vessels. Colony transports. Thousands of them, from dozens of species, all converging on predetermined coordinates. The Val'Kesh traders who had voted to surrender? Some of their merchant families refused to abandon humanity. They loaded their cargo holds not with goods, but with supplies for Earth's defenders. The Taucine, whose crystal bodies could manipulate energy. A group of young rebels decided their elders were wrong to surrender. They joined the gathering fleet, ready to use their unique abilities. Even the Gorvan, massive bear-like creatures known for their strength but not their courage, sent volunteers. The humans asked for help, their leader said simply. "That's more than anyone else has done for us in 100 years. The human plan." Back on Earth, Admiral Park revealed the full plan to his senior staff. It was audacious. Insane, some would say. But it might just work. "The Kravish expect us to meet them in space," Park explained. "They expect a traditional battle. Instead, we let them come. We let them think they've won. And then we show them what humanity does best." "And what's that, sir?" asked General Sarah Chen. Park's smile was cold. "We adapt. We improvise. We turn their strengths into weaknesses. The Kravish have never lost a battle because they're predictable. They use overwhelming force. They follow doctrine. They can't imagine that someone would dare to fight differently." He pulled up a new display, showing Earth's defensive network. But it wasn't what anyone expected. There were no massive weapons platforms. No fleets of warships. "We're going to make them come down," Park said quietly. "And then we're going to teach them why you should never corner a human." The countdown begins. As the Kravish fleet drew closer, other species watched from across the galaxy. Most expected to witness humanity's destruction. Some prayed silently for the brave fools who had dared to resist. A few, a precious few, hoped against hope that something might change. On the command deck of the Kravish flagship, Dracus studied the sensor readings of Earth. He saw the planet's defenses. Minimal space stations. A small fleet of military vessels. Nothing that could stop even a fraction of his forces. "They're not even running," he mused. "The humans are just waiting." How disappointing. His second-in-command clicked his mandibles nervously. "Commander, we've detected unusual activity in the outer system. Civilian vessels from other species. Should we engage?" Dracus waved a dismissive hand. "Ignore them. Probably refugees trying to evacuate the humans." Let them watch. Let them tell the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. But if Dracus had looked more carefully at those civilian vessels, he might have noticed something odd. They were positioning themselves in a very specific pattern. A pattern that made no sense for evacuation. A pattern that looked almost like a trap. The last night. On Earth, people went about their lives with a strange calm. They had been told the truth. The Kravish were coming. The odds were impossible. But humanity had a plan, and they trusted their military to execute it. In homes around the world, families gathered. Not to panic. Not to flee. But to stand together. Parents told their children stories of times when humans had faced impossible odds before and somehow found a way through. Elena Vasquez stood on a balcony in New York, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, death was approaching. But she wasn't afraid. She had seen the human spirit. She had seen how, when backed into a corner, humanity didn't break. They fought back with everything they had. Her communicator buzzed. A message from Admiral Park. Just 2 words. It's time. Elena smiled. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn what it meant to threaten Earth the day Earth taught the galaxy. Dawn of the invasion. The Kravish fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of locusts. 3,000 warships, each one capable of reducing a city to rubble in minutes. War Commander Dracus stood on his flagship's bridge, watching Earth grow larger on the view screen. Begin the broadcast, he ordered. Let the galaxy watch. Across civilized space, beings gathered around their communication devices. The assembly hall was packed, though now it felt more like a funeral. They would witness humanity's end, broadcast live across the stars. The trap springs. The Kravish fleet moved toward Earth in their standard formation. Overwhelming. Unstoppable. But as they crossed into the inner system, something unexpected happened. Those civilian ships that had been dismissed as evacuees suddenly lit up their engines. They weren't running away. They were moving into position. Dracus frowned. What are those ships doing? Before anyone could answer, space itself seemed to shimmer. The civilian vessels, it turned out, weren't just ships. They were mobile emitters. Hundreds of them, all activating at once, creating a massive energy field that enveloped the Kravish fleet. Commander, an officer shouted. Our jump drives are offline. We can't leave the system. Dracus snarled. It doesn't matter. We destroy them now, then we break free. All ships, advance. But Admiral Park had planned for this. As the Kravish fleet pressed forward, Earth's minimal defenses suddenly didn't look so minimal. Space stations that had appeared to be simple outposts revealed hidden weapon batteries. Asteroids that had been dismissed as navigation hazards turned out to be camouflaged military bases. And then the real surprise hit. The Volunteers' strike. From above and below the plane of battle, the Volunteer fleet struck. Val'Kesh trading ships, modified with military-grade weapons. Taucine energy manipulators, turning the Kravish's own weapons back on them. Gorvan transports that had been reinforced to ram and disable enemy vessels. They weren't trained military. They didn't have the best equipment. But they had something the Kravish didn't understand. They had a reason to fight beyond following orders. They were fighting for their freedom. For their dignity. For the crazy species that had dared to ask them to stand up. The Kravish fleet, caught in the energy trap and surrounded by unexpected resistance, began to falter. Ships collided as they tried to regroup. Orders were confused. For the first time in 100 years, the Kravish war machine didn't know what to do. Humanity's gambit. But the real battle was just beginning. Admiral Park had never intended to destroy the Kravish fleet in space. That would have been impossible. Instead, he had one goal: bring them down to Earth. They think in terms of fleet battles, Park had explained to his officers. But humans? We've been fighting on our home ground for thousands of years. Let's see how good they are at that. As the Kravish fleet struggled in orbit, human forces began a calculated withdrawal. They gave ground slowly, deliberately, making the Kravish think they were winning. Dracus, frustrated by the unexpected resistance but confident in his superior numbers, made the fatal decision. "Deploy ground forces," he ordered. "We'll take the planet the old-fashioned way." Thousands of Kravish soldiers dropped toward Earth's surface. They were the best warriors in the galaxy. Each one had been trained from birth for combat. They had conquered 100 worlds. Earth would just be one more. They were very, very wrong. The ground war. The Kravish soldiers landed expecting to face organized military resistance. Instead, they found something far more terrifying. They found humans fighting on their home soil. Every city became a maze. Every building a fortress. The humans didn't line up for formal battles. They struck from shadows, disappeared, struck again. Soldiers who thought they were hunting humans found themselves being hunted instead. A Kravish squad entered a warehouse district in Tokyo. As they moved between buildings, explosions ripped through their formation. But when they tried to identify the source, there was nothing. The humans had already moved to new positions. In the streets of Lagos, Kravish warriors found themselves facing not just soldiers, but civilians. Old men who had fought in wars decades past. Teenagers who knew every alley and rooftop. They didn't fight fair. They used improvised weapons, traps, anything they could find. The Kravish had armor and advanced weapons, but humans had home field advantage. The turning point. What the Kravish hadn't understood was that humans had been preparing for this for 3 weeks. Not just militarily, but psychologically. Every person on Earth knew what was at stake. Every person had a role to play. Supply lines became impossible to maintain as civilian volunteers sabotaged Kravish logistics. Command posts were identified and targeted by resistance cells. Even the weather seemed to turn against the invaders as humans used their knowledge of local conditions to their advantage. In the skies above, the volunteer fleet continued to harass the Kravish warships. They couldn't win in a straight fight, but they didn't need to. They just needed to keep the enemy busy, confused, unable to properly support their ground forces. On his flagship, Dracus watched in growing horror as his invasion stalled. Then reversed. His soldiers, the finest warriors in the galaxy, were being beaten by a species they had dismissed as weak. Not through superior firepower. Through superior determination. The message. On the 7th day of the invasion, Admiral Park sent a message. Not to the Kravish. To the entire galaxy. "This is Admiral James Park of Earth Defense Command. For 7 days, the Kravish Empire has tried to conquer our world. They came with 3,000 warships. They landed hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They believed we would surrender because we were outnumbered. They were wrong." The feed switched to show Kravish forces in retreat. Destroyed vehicles. Captured positions. And everywhere, humans. Fighting. Winning. "The Kravish made a mistake," Park continued. "They thought military power was the only thing that mattered. They forgot something important. They forgot that the strongest weapon isn't a ship or a gun. It's the will to fight for what you believe in." He paused, letting his words sink in across the galaxy. To every species watching this, you don't have to be the strongest. You don't have to have the best technology. You just have to decide that you won't give up. That you won't kneel. And if you make that choice, we'll stand with you. Because that's what humans do. We stand with those who are willing to stand for themselves. The Kravish retreat. On the 15th day, War Commander Dracus made the hardest decision of his life. He ordered a full retreat. The Kravish Empire, undefeated for a century, was running away from a single planet. As his battered fleet limped out of Earth's solar system, the energy trap finally released them. They jumped away, leaving behind thousands of dead soldiers and destroyed ships. More importantly, they left behind their reputation for invincibility. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The impossible had happened. Humanity, with help from the species nobody thought mattered, had won. The aftermath. In the Grand Assembly Hall, the representatives gathered again. But this time, the mood was different. Ambassador Theron of the Val'Kesh stood, his 6 arms steady now. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I thought survival meant surrender. The humans taught us otherwise." High Counselor Mira floated forward, her crystalline body glowing brighter than it had in years. "The vote to submit tribute. I call for a re-vote. All in favor of refusing the Krovish demand?" Every hand, tentacle, wing, and appendage in the chamber raised. The vote was unanimous. Elena Vasquez stood at Earth's podium, watching the other species realize what they had just learned. They had found their courage. Not because humans had fought for them, but because humans had shown them how to fight for themselves. The new alliance. In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented happened. The quiet ones, the species who had volunteered to help Earth, they didn't go back to being ignored. They formed a new alliance. The League of Free Worlds, they called it. Not built on military might or economic power, but on a simple principle. No one would stand alone again. The Val'Kesh merchants who had brought supplies to Earth? They became the League's trade network. The Talcine energy manipulators? They shared their technology freely. The Gorvan, who had found their courage? They became defenders, but not conquerors. And humanity? They became teachers. Not teaching how to fight, but how to stand up. How to believe in yourself even when everything says you should give up. The Krovish question. The Krovish Empire didn't collapse overnight. But their defeat at Earth had consequences. Other species they had conquered began to rebel. The fear that had held the Empire together started to crack. And when those rebels needed help, the League was there. Not with conquest. Not with domination. But with support. With supplies. With the knowledge that they weren't alone. War Commander Dracus, stripped of his rank and exiled, watched from a remote station as his empire slowly crumbled. He had learned the same lesson the galaxy had learned, but far too late. Power without principle is hollow. And when you face someone who refuses to be afraid, all your weapons mean nothing. The human legacy. 5 years after the invasion, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in a new building. The Hall of Unity, they called it. Built on Earth, but belonging to all species. She looked out at the gathered representatives, hundreds of species that had once lived in fear. "We're often asked why humanity did it," she said. "Why we refused to surrender when every logical calculation said we should. The answer is simple. We've learned, through our own long history, that freedom is worth fighting for. That dignity matters. That how you stand means more than whether you win." She smiled, looking at the faces of beings from 1,000 worlds. The Krovish thought they could rule through fear. They were wrong. Because fear is only powerful if you let it control you. And the moment you decide not to be afraid anymore, you become unstoppable. The final word. On a quiet colony world at the edge of known space, an old Val'Kesh trader told his grandchildren about the day everything changed. About the species that said no when everyone else said yes. About the battle that proved courage matters more than strength. Remember, he told them, his 6 arms gesturing as he spoke, the humans weren't special because they were strong. They were special because they believed. And because they believed, they helped us believe too. That's the real lesson. That's what saved the galaxy. His grandchildren listened, their young eyes wide. And in the morning, they would go to school. A school built by the League of Free Worlds. Where they would learn not just mathematics and science, but something more important. They would learn that no one, no matter how weak they seem, has to accept being a victim. They would learn that standing together makes everyone stronger. They would learn the lesson humanity had taught the galaxy. That the quiet ones, when they finally speak, can change the universe.